You're listening to Life, the Universe, and Everything Else. Today on the show, we talk about Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s worst ideas.
Did we get all the worst ones?
Some of them. I feel like he has to have more.
We talk about some of RFK Jr.'s worst ideas.
Life, the Universe, and Everything Else explores the intersection of science and society. Original music is produced by Ian James, and this episode was edited by Marissa McCool. Find her on Patreon at patreon.com/QAF.
My name is Jem Newman, and with me today I have Lauren Bailey.
Hello.
Ashlyn Noble.
Hello.
And Laura Creek Newman.
Hi there.
So we're going to rip this Band-Aid right off. On the 14th of November, 2024, President-elect Donald Trump announced his nomination of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to lead the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, effectively putting him in charge of American medical research, food safety, Medicare, Medicaid, and vaccine authorization. Kennedy is a grade A crank and contender for the title of Worst Ever Kennedy, a crowded field if ever there was one. RFK is, without exaggeration, the worst possible pick for this role. I would argue Alex Jones would even be a better choice.
Oof.
At least, he would have less cachet. So he might get a little less done. I don't know. We'll see. So today we're going to dive deep-ish into some of Kennedy's most foolish, dangerous ideas about public health. And we're going to start with Ashlyn, who will tell us all about Kennedy's stance in history with regard to vaccines.
For listeners who've been with us for some length of time, my segment, and indeed this entire episode, can really be summed up very quickly. RFK Jr. is buddies with Andrew Wakefield, known around these parts as human garbage. In fact, he has said, in any just society, we would be building statues to Andy Wakefield. Yikes. That is how much he is buddies with Andy Wakefield.
There's one statue I want to give Wakefield.
Things are worse than ever.
However, in the interest of filling out at least 5 minutes, here are some other relevant facts. Mr. Kennedy has denied that he is against vaccination. He calls himself a vaccine safety activist, and he says he questions corporate influence on science. However, he also admits that he goes up to women that he sees with babies and begs them to please not vaccinate their beautiful babies, just in case. He's hoping to plant some seeds, which I'm sure he does.
Oh, God.
Can you imagine just a random old guy coming up to you in a park where you're having a walk with your child and just being like, please don't vaccinate that child, you're going to kill it.
Yeah.
That's going to stick in your mind.
It was bad enough when our neighbor did it.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember you telling us about that. Oh, just no. And at least, like you have to see them all the time. Oh.
We all just pretend we don't exist.
That's
now.
good. That's good. That's what happens with our angry neighbor. Anywho. Next fact. He was hugely responsible for a measles outbreak in Samoa. He visited the island after a medical mistake involving the incorrect mixing of vaccines with a steroid rather than saline resulted in the tragic death of 2 children. Mm-hmm. Before this, vaccine rates were going down, but after they just absolutely plummeted. And he met with local leaders and sent a letter to the president suggesting the age-old debunked myth that vaccines themselves cause measles. Unfortunately, he was taken seriously by way too many people. Thousands of people got measles and 80 people died.
80 is going to be a recurring number on this show.
Fun.
Great.
One super fun quote from him. There's no vaccine that is, safe and effective.
I don't know, actually.
Oh, God.
I would say I know the opposite.
No vaccines. No vaccines are safe and effective.
Put the science juice in my arms.
It is.
So many So many juice references tonight. Didn't each of you make one? Oh, God.
It
continues.
is, like, I remember when I was administering lots of COVID vaccines, and they required dilution, like a lot of them do when you're getting multi-dose vials. And it is high stakes. But there are, luckily in our health system, or not luckily, but by design, after tragedies like this occur, there are steps in place to prevent the wrong dilutant being available to make that mistake.
Right. They shouldn't have been in the same area.
Yeah, exactly. And there are cases where, especially in rural ER, I have found things definitely in the wrong place and tried to correct it and like that. Mistakes do happen. And it is too bad that this very clear example of like a human error was used as an excuse to do something when it is very clear to everybody who knows what happened that it had nothing to do with the vaccine.
Yeah, nothing at all. But it was so easy to use it as a fear-mongering cudgel because babies died. And that is awful. But it wasn't the vaccine. It was being injected with steroids that killed them. Whew. Other fun quotes from RFK Jr. The, quote, powerful vaccine cartel, led by Dr. Anthony Fauci and Bill Gates, worked to prolong the pandemic and amplify its mortal effects, and led an effort to deliberately derail America's access to life-saving drugs and medicines, like ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, in favor of their nefarious vaccine project. These are, of course, his opinions on the COVID vaccine project. These are his opinions on vaccinating the population against an extremely communicable pandemic, which wouldn't be so scary because we just had a pandemic, except that we have another one like brewing imminently. And he's about to be in charge of the administrative wing that would be responsible for distributing a vaccine against such a pandemic in the States. Very exciting. Yeah, his views on vaccines are so extreme as to be like comic book villain unbelievable.
Yep.
And I believe that will be a theme that carries through, unfortunately, many of our segments today.
I literally talk about Arkham Asylum in mine, so yeah.
Oh, goodness.
You know what? I think he might be closest to almost right when it comes to my segment, but not close enough. Not nearly close enough.
I mean, he has a few ideas in there about like nutrition, and there's a few points that I have heard that I can't bring to mind right now that I'm willing to give him. That is what I would say.
Yes, a few things like
brainworm awareness.
What's that?
Brainworm awareness.
Yeah. Like there's a couple of things like people should have access to, like people should have fresh foods.
Yes.
All, like as often as they can. People should have like, I think he said something about like clean water or something, like basic things that we can all get behind. And
so when he says clean water, I'm pretty sure he does mean like unfluoridated, untreated water.
Yeah.
So and that's
maybe
the
with
thing,
a fancy pH number.
And even the fresh food thing. I don't mean to hijack your segment here, but it's
done.
something that's been going around the dietitian podcast circles a lot. That it's like his fresh food thing is both like very specific, like organic, like white people health foods kind of stuff.
Food-a-day foods.
And also, he has zero plan or thought of the reasons why those things aren't available.
Yeah.
And doesn't care to do that.
No, that's not interesting.
It's not interesting, and it would mean that people might have to help one another to get there.
I've been listening to a new fun podcast to chill out called I Hate Bill Maher. Which is not my something nice, but it could be. It's fun if you, like me, hate Bill Maher.
Doesn't everybody?
But you hear Bill Maher occasionally talk about nutrition and vaccines, and he shares a lot in common with RFK Jr.
Oh,
Gross.
But whenever he starts talking about nutrition, and I get this vibe from RFK too, it really quickly dives into orthorexia.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like the kind of guy that he is exactly orthorexia territory.
Yeah. Bill Maher constantly promoting nutrition as an eating disorder.
I mean, I could talk on this forever, but that's kind of society's view of nutrition.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, back to Ashlyn.
No, genuinely, that was the end of my segment.
Okay.
And I think that those few statements are enough to really just sum up how completely unhinged he is on the subject and how unable to ever see the light. I don't give up on a lot of people, but I think he's up there with Andrew Wakefield because he idolizes him.
And for listeners who might be new, might not be aware,
I'm sorry, I did actually mean to do that. Andrew Wakefield did he did a fraud. He did a fraud, which turned into a study that got published and then retracted and denounced by everybody who matters about whether vaccines cause autism. They do not.
Specifically the measles, mumps, and rubella combination vaccine.
And mercury or whatever. He has a lot of extremist beliefs, and even though he has had all of his research called into question and his medical license revoked.
Yep.
Yeah, in the UK, he can no longer practice medicine.
He continues to spout his garbage and cause the deaths of children.
Yeah. He moved to America. He not only was his data fraudulent, he also had recently patented a competing vaccine and didn't disclose that conflict of interest. He paid participants.
And he bribed the children to participate.
It was
Six children at a birthday party.
So it was so ridiculous, and that's the part that it's like he's so full of bull because he never believed his argument to begin with.
Yeah.
He never went in there being like, I think there's a problem.
He doesn't stand for anything.
He was always just like, I want to make money off my vaccine, and I can't do that now, so I guess all vaccines are bad. Whatever brings in the money.
Yeah, I'm going to take my ball and go home. I'm going to take all your balls too.
Yeah.
Grifter's gonna grift.
And and so Andrew Wakefield just keeps doing this because he keeps making money off of it. Right.
So
and he has no moral compass, apparently.
So if the suggestion of Andrew Wakefield being appointed the Secretary of Health and Human Services makes your blood run cold, the phrase RFK Jr. has been suggested for that position should give you exactly the same reaction.
Yeah. And again, probably worse because he's Andrew Wakefield, but on a bunch of subjects.
Yes. But I only researched this one.
Yeah. So why don't we move on to the next one? On November 2nd, 2024, RFK Jr. tweeted, "Fluoride is an industrial waste associated with arthritis, bone fractures, bone cancer, IQ loss, neurodevelopmental disorders, and thyroid disease."
And good teeth.
That sounds like a list of things that some sort of miracle cure cures.
These health claims are, let's say, extremely misleading. So let's talk about them. But first off, what is fluoride?
An element.
Yeah.
It's a mineral.
It is. So it is an element and a mineral. So it is, I think, the 12th or 13th most common element found on Earth. It is a mineral that's naturally found in water, soil, and many types of food. Arguably all types of food, depending on how sensitive you are at detecting small amounts of it. All plant matter contains at least some fluoride, and it's particularly plentiful in certain plants, like the ones being consumed by some of my co-panelists at this moment. Very plentiful in tea leaves.
I feel like I'm going to regret this, but I'm very curious about arguably all foods. what is it argued it is not in?
So it would be in everything, but in certain animal products, it would probably be found in amounts so trace that you couldn't really detect it.
Okay.
But because everything is sort of built up in the food chain and gets transferred from predator to prey, or prey to predator, and like that.
Okay.
Also, if you're eating bones and teeth, then you're more likely to get some.
Oh, for sure.
Just throwing that.
But
out
it's
there.
not in. I see. It's not used in the flesh. It's used in the bones and the in bodies or whatever.
Well, we'll get to that.
Okay. Cool.
So, fluoride's primary relevance to our discussion today is its use in cavity prevention. In the 19th and early 20th century, researchers began to suspect that fluoride could play a role in dental health. Today, there are copious randomized controlled trials demonstrating the safety and efficacy of fluoride in preventing tooth decay, but in the early 20th century, population data was the name of the game. Okay, one of the earliest investigations occurred in Colorado, where it was noted that people in some areas were prone to brown stains on their teeth, which happened to correlate to both higher levels of naturally occurring fluoride in the water in that area and also lower rates of tooth decay. These brown stains, which were found in regions where the groundwater contained fluoride concentrations in excess of 2 parts per million, up to 13 parts per million, these were examples of dental fluorosis, which we'll discuss later, these brown stains. The first toothpastes containing fluoride were marketed in Europe in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, but did not become popular in North America until the 1950s, with Floristan, the first fluoridated toothpaste approved by the American Dental Association, which hit the market in 1954. The following year, Floristan was renamed...
No.
Anyone?
Colgate? Crest?
It
had to be one of them.
I was going to go like Sensodyne.
Yeah, no.
Aquafresh.
Yeah, it's not Aquafresh.
Not Aquafresh.
Procter & Gamble is also called the house that Crest built.
Kitten kickers.
Strictly speaking, fluoride doesn't actually prevent cavities, but when fluoride ions are present in the mouth, they are incorporated into tooth enamel in the form of fluorapatite, a crystal containing fluoride, calcium, and phosphate. When fluorapatite is present in tooth enamel, the rate of demineralization due to dental caries is slowed, and remineralization is increased, effectively slowing or even reversing cavity formation. Okay? So this also applies to parts of the skeleton as well. My understanding, I'm not a dentist, but my understanding is that teeth don't have the same rate of turnover that the rest of our bones do, but in the body, bones are constantly being demineralized and remineralized, and the rates of each of those can affect bone density and can also affect bone composition. So fluoride, when you have it in your mouth, essentially it prevents cavities because it slows the rate at which your teeth are broken down and increases the rate at which the enamel, the hard outer shell of the tooth, is sort of built back up. So those with minimal fluoride exposure are at greater risk of dental caries, tooth decay, than those with more. So why is it in water? Well, fluoride has to be present in the mouth several times daily in order to form sufficient quantities of fluorapatite to be effective in preventing tooth decay. Hence the importance of incorporating it into water or staple foodstuffs, or making it part of a routine that occurs multiple times a day, like brushing. In 1945, Grand Rapids, Michigan became the first city in the world to add fluoride to its drinking water, and today about 2/3 of Americans with access to public water supply have fluoridated water, compared with just under half of Canadians.
I grew up on a well system. I'm sure you did too, and I had to get the fluoride treatments at school.
I had, fluoride treatments once or twice a year was part of elementary school.
We had
everybody took it. You swished,
Yep.
and that was the worst minute of the month. God, I
did
remember
it at
that.
school.
Yeah, we did them
it
at
was
school.
you go and you sit, and everybody in my class got it, unless you got excused from it.
They
for
would
some
come in with
reason,
little
I think.
trays of Dixie cups, and what's the flavor that you would hope it was mint, and you would
I don't know what flavor it was. It wasn't mint, but I did hate mint. But it was just horrific. It was. Ugh. I told Jem about this a while ago, and he's like, "You did what?" And I'm like, "Yeah, didn't you do the fluoride? That was the worst."
Fluoride treatments in school.
For the record, in my opinion, mint, not the best flavor for fluoride products. The best flavor is wintergreen, which is not a mint.
Fuck off. So
Wintergreen is a drag queen.
It's a classic Crest flavor that is now getting hard to find.
Good.
It's the flavor of those pink mints that Huxley loves.
I find them all too sweet.
Yeah. I can see that. It's got a
Toothpaste is
smoothness.
too sweet to me.
Yeah. Sorry, Ashlyn.
for many years as a child, I would hopefully try whatever one of the flavors that the dentist listed that sounded like the best flavor, like I would choose an ice cream. My life at the dentist improved when I realized it's really hard to fuck up mint. Mm-hmm. And it's gonna taste like mint, and it's not gonna be unexpected weirdness. It'll at least taste like what I expect, and that just made everything better. And that is my philosophy now: is you can't fuck up mint.
You guys got to choose?
Yeah, I used to get like 3 or 4 options. Some of them were like strawberry banana, or
That's
like
amoxicillin flavor. Come on,
black raspberry. Like some of them sounded good, and then they would just taste like disappointment and badness.
Oh, that's fun.
So I actually looked into buying like a jug of it because I am very bad at brushing my teeth, as we have discussed on this very podcast, and just have a lot of sensory issues around it. And I wanted to get some of the like super strong fluoride solution to just swish around. You really can't buy that as a civilian.
No, yeah, it's
quite
dangerous.
Yeah. But if you're
it.
using it appropriately, it is okay.
Yeah. There is, speaking of dead kids, there is one at least documented case of a small child dying at the dentist after accidentally consuming I think it was like 50 milliliters or something. Ooh. So like a fifth of a cup for our American listeners of 2% fluoride solution.
That is not very much.
Nope.
Ooh.
But small kid and high concentration.
Yeah.
So 2% is much more than 2 parts per million. It's 2 parts per 100. Because that's how percent works.
Thanks, Jem.
Health Canada, after taking into account population data about the use of dental products containing fluoride, such as toothpaste and mouthwashes, so Ashlyn, you can get fluoride-containing mouthwashes.
I am aware, but it is a garbage percentage, and I might as well just wash with water after I put toothpaste on, because toothpaste is a way higher concentration. Mm-hmm. This has made me angry for a long time.
I heard that like stored up rant energy coming out.
So Health Canada has determined that the optimal level of fluoride in the water in Canada is 0.7 parts per million, or 0.7 milligrams per liter. This is the same target that is used in the United States and I believe in Mexico. I'm not positive about that, but it's the most common concentration in North America. It is lower, so that's the optimal level. It is lower than the sort of safe level determined by the WHO, which is 1.5 parts per million. But there's a slight difference between safe level and target level and like that, which I'll kind of get into. It's important to note that the naturally occurring concentration of fluoride in the water, which is largely dependent on like the mineral composition in the area, is higher than this target level in some areas. And in those areas, Health Canada's water fluoridation program actually aims to remove fluoride from the water, so to decrease the level to hit that target. This whole process of water fluoridation isn't about adding a dangerous chemical to your drinking water. It is about adjusting the levels of a naturally occurring mineral in your drinking water to be optimal for your health and the health of other members of your community.
I've never had anybody put it that way. I like that.
Well, because the reduction targets and that is never part of the discourse on that. It's only about the addition, right? So you don't think of it as the whole scheme and really the equalizing, right? Helping to make sure that more or most people have that optimal or near optimal level.
Sounds like socialism, Laura.
I'm about to be a social worker.
Okay, so
if I pass my classes, which I'm not feeling good about, but go on.
You're not feeling good about it?
Go on.
Okay. You mentioned at the top, I don't remember the exact phrasing, that something around 50% of Canadians have access to fluoridated water or water that is the correct fluoride level.
So water that has its fluoride level adjusted to the correct level. So it's possible that some of those people who aren't in that 50%, who are, I guess, in the other about 50%,
have like approximately good natural.
Could have approximately the right amount. It's more common to have less.
Yeah.
But occasionally you get some regions where you have more than the recommended intake. And in some regions, it's especially common in parts of India, it's a big problem, much higher concentrations.
Yeah. At really, really high concentrations, it can cause like bone deformations, especially in the legs and that because of the...
I think I did a whole segment on fluoride at one point because I have a lot of like weird stored up knowledge that is coming to the fore.
So we've done a lot of segments.
So in Canada, the way we address fluoride for population dental health is by adding it to the water. In some countries, particularly those with inadequate centralized water supplies, fluoride is added instead to staple foods such as salt, in much the same way that all table salt sold in Canada is required to contain iodine. Who can tell me why this is? Probably Laura.
I did a segment on it, but I don't remember my own segments. It's a common vehicle for that. Are you asking why table salt or why?
No, why we need iodine supplementation.
Oh, for your thyroid.
Yeah.
For creation of thyroid hormones.
So iodine deficiency is very common in populations that don't eat much seafood because that's the primary dietary source of iodine among human beings. And iodine deficiency commonly results in a goiter, so this huge neck swelling that is due to thyroid dysfunction. And in order for the thyroid to properly make...
You can also get a goiter from mumps, which ties us back to RFK.
Goiters all around.
So the thyroid makes your thyroid hormone, which is required for optimal sort of... Like, it is one of the most important. I mean, all the body hormones are pretty important, but it like drives your metabolism. So if you have too much or too little, it has huge effects.
It's a real Goldilocks
very
hormone.
Important for like growing and stuff too, right?
Growing, like pretty much everything. Thinking, breathing, heart health, everything.
Please, my personal doctor, if you're listening, please let me go on the pills.
So in some countries, they add fluoride to the water, like here. In some, they add it to salt. In some, they add it to milk. And in some, as was more common in Canada in the past, they have school-based programs to do washing or varnishing of kids' teeth with fluoride.
Right after lunch.
So...
Well, because you can't eat for 30 minutes after.
There's fluoride in toothpaste, right? Isn't that enough? Well, it certainly helps. A large Cochrane review compared rates of decayed, missing, or filled teeth, so DMF teeth, between those who... That's the actual acronym.
That's
what they use, or initialism, excuse me.
That's not
initialism.
the problem, Jem. Continue.
This Cochrane review compared rates of decayed, missing, or filled teeth between those who brushed with toothpaste containing high levels of fluoride versus those who didn't. The mean difference for those who used a toothpaste with 1,500 parts per million fluoride versus those who didn't use fluoride at all was negative 1.86 DFS, which means those who brushed with fluoridated toothpaste tended to have 2 more healthy teeth, approximately, than those who didn't. Okay? So that's a difference.
Great.
But it's not as big as you would expect.
Yeah.
The reason for that is, like, fluoridated toothpaste is not the only thing. The physical act of brushing, with or without fluoride, is also helpful to remove... remove plaque and also remove food.
One of the segments that I did previously about teeth was about those flossy sticks. Like there's some cultures that just like rub their teeth with sticks and it's almost as effective just because you're taking off a bunch of that biofilm.
In addition, the fact that this review included data from a lot of places where water is fluoridated as well, sort of decreases the relative efficacy of fluoridated toothpaste because we have multiple vectors by which our teeth are getting fluoride. In any event, having fluoride in your toothpaste is helpful. The fluoride levels in toothpaste actually varies quite a bit, but the evidence shows that fluoride concentrations between 450 and 1500 ppm all seem to provide increasing benefit with increasing fluoride concentration. But ultimately, the difference between like 450 and 1500 isn't huge clinically. So, and we also don't see evidence of much benefit beyond 1500 parts per million.
That's the cap.
Yeah, approximately.
More or less, sure.
Yeah.
There's also limits. The number of studies that have studied toothpaste with higher concentrations, pretty limited as well, from what I understand. The most common toothpaste sold in North America, including those from both Crest and Colgate, contain about 1,100 parts per million fluoride, while toothpaste in Europe tend to use a slightly higher concentration of about 1,500. Either way, completely adequate.
We're getting what we need to protect our mouth rocks.
Completely adequate.
So yes, there is fluoride in toothpaste, and it is helpful. But the evidence shows that water fluoridation provides additional benefit, not only to those who can't or don't brush regularly, which is a significant consideration because you have unhoused people without like access to oral hygiene supplies for a variety of reasons.
People in the hospital who can't get out of bed on their own to go do it.
And who don't have sufficient help doing it, which they should. People who forget or have capacity issues, or kids who are pretending to be asleep. So hopefully they'll get out of brushing their teeth, something that I did when I was a kid and remember vividly. All of these people benefit from fluoridated water. And those of us who do brush twice a day with fluoridated toothpaste also have a boost to our oral health as a result of the additional exposures to fluoride that our teeth have. Remember, repeated exposure to fluoride throughout the day is more effective at strengthening enamel than just having a big dose all at once. And there is some evidence that brushing more than twice a day with a fluoridated toothpaste or without may actually be detrimental to your oral health, especially if you really scrub those teeth. I got told that I was brushing too much. Knock it off.
Yeah, exactly.
My mom got told that she needed to chill out and stop like scraping away her gums, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Her toothbrushes always looked like the splayed out, completely ruined.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was brushing because I had so many cavities, because we couldn't afford dental care, and I have British teeth, and I guess pretended to be asleep so I would escape brushing when I was a kid. Whatever, all like these things can all come into play. When I first got back into oral care, when I could afford to go see, I couldn't afford to go see a real dentist, but I could afford to go see the student dentists at
the dental school.
The dental school. When I got back into that, I started brushing my teeth more than twice a day and very vigorously, and I was told to knock it off. Where was I? Right. So water fluoridation has also been shown to be very cost-effective when it comes to oral health interventions. It costs between $1 and $2 per person per year to provide fluoridated water. Estimates vary, but for each dollar spent on water fluoridation, we collectively save between $7 and $42 in dental treatments. So, ounce of prevention, pound of cure, etc. So, let's talk specifically about RFK's claims. Fear-mongering about fluoride isn't new. As many of us remember, we probably covered on the podcast in 2011, the Canadian city of Calgary, known by some as the Dallas of the North, halted their water fluoridation program. And 6 years later, a study was published showing that there was a significant increase in dental cavities among children as a result. And this wasn't just a temporal correlation. Cavities went up after fluoride was ceased. They actually compared it to another major Alberta city, Edmonton, the Winnipeg of Alberta, that also showed that there was like a very mild increase in dental caries, there was a much more significant increase over that same time period in Calgary, which is attributed to the lack of water fluoridation. So, again, let's tackle RFK's claims one by one. His first.
And there are no stupid questions.
Is fluoride an industrial waste product?
That's the stupidest question I've ever heard.
This claim makes me so mad. It is emblematic of RFK's entire deal. It is such a classic example of not even wrong that it is infuriating.
Is this like the whole, like, there's yoga mat chemicals in your Subway bun level? Because it sounds like it.
So it does kind of remind me of that claim. It also reminds me of the claim that Cheese Whiz is one molecule away from plastic, as if that means anything. What is one molecule away?
It's the missing link. We're just looking for the missing link.
Like, if you know anything about structural or organic chemistry, you're like, that's not a thing. What are you talking about, one molecule away?
Okay, so his industrial waste argument is based on this is not a thing.
Literally anything can be an industrial waste product. The phrase sounds scary, but all it means is it is something produced by an industry during a manufacturing process that is not itself incorporated into the end product, right? So let's list some common industrial waste products, shall we? How about wheat bran, which results from the industrial production of white flour? Or water, which is a byproduct of alcohol distillation. These are industrial waste products. I'm not going to waste listeners' time by rattling off any more, but you get the point. Like, some industrial waste products, extremely dangerous. Some industrial waste products, completely benign. Like, fucking industrial waste products. Come on. It's like saying fluoride is dangerous because it isn't natural. First off, it is natural. And second, whether something is natural or not has nothing to do with whether it's safe.
Dog shit is natural.
As I am fond of saying, arsenic, snake venom, and bear attacks are all perfectly natural, and none of them are good for you in large doses.
Wait, whoa, what's that last caveat there? Hold up. Dr. Newman, hold up. Just say it.
Dr. Newman prescribes
snake venom in small doses.
Infrequent bear attacks.
Small amounts of arsenic and snake venom.
Everything in moderation, right, Laura?
So how are Laura's levels doing, speaking of moderation?
Shut up. I don't like that you broke my bad mood. It made me laugh.
Oh, wow. Saying the quiet part out loud there, Laura.
It was intentional.
I know.
Okay. So, the next question. Does fluoride cause arthritis or bone fractures? What Kennedy is presumably referring to here is skeletal fluorosis.
I feel like you're giving him a whole lot of space there, but go on.
Okay.
He's ever said the word fluorosis in his life.
So
maybe.
Skeletal fluorosis, so the only plausible thing that he might be referring to is skeletal fluorosis. So skeletal fluorosis is an extremely rare condition that occurs in places with naturally very high fluoride concentrations in the water. Many parts of India, as I mentioned previously, have groundwater that contains more than the recommended concentration of fluoride, more than the WHO's suggested limit of 1.5 parts per million. Other places include some parts of Colorado, which, as I said earlier off the top, concentrations up to 13.4 parts per million, I think. So skeletal fluorosis, what it does, actually, is it makes your bones harder. Wouldn't that make them stronger?
Flexibility is part of strength.
Exactly. The mighty oak cracks in the storm while the supple willow weathers it well.
Of course.
So yeah, that's exactly the issue. A lot of the reason that actually kids have way fewer bone fractures than adults when participating in similar activities or getting similar types of injuries, they're less likely to have fractures. Their fractures also heal better, and their fractures are likely to be less severe. They have fewer comminuted fractures with multiple pieces, is because their bones are not fully calcified and they're not as hard. There are other reasons too. Their bodies are just younger and stronger and work better. Yeah.
Kids bounce.
Kids do bounce. So when you get this excessive mineral deposit, very similar to like the process that occurs with your teeth. That's good. When you get this hardening process in the bones get too hard and they can crack more easily. So this claim is plausible. Similarly, when there is additional sclerosis or hardening of the bones, you can get a little bit of an increase in osteoarthritis, the degenerative arthritis. But again, this is not found in people who have appropriately fluoridated water. This is found in people who are exposed to like many multiples of the target water fluoridation metric. So because of the way water fluoridation works and the fact that we test the water and hit an appropriate target, you're actually more likely to get skeletal fluorosis if you're not doing water fluoridation, because you're not catching those areas where the natural fluoride concentration is too high.
Yeah.
Okay? So, does fluoride cause bone cancer? This is one that I actually hadn't heard before, and my knee-jerk was like, no, probably not. What are you talking about? But of course, it's important to actually do your due diligence. So I checked this out, and the evidence here is extremely mixed and unconvincing at best. There are a small number of studies that show that certain male rats may have higher rates of a specific type of rare bone cancer called osteosarcoma when they ingest high levels of fluoride. So this isn't exactly a slam dunk here.
But it's one of those facts that's very twistable.
Yeah. So some population studies have purported to show a very weak link between fluoride exposure and cancer. I believe it was specifically in men, while others have attempted to replicate that and shown no link at all. Okay? In 2010, the European Scientific Committee on Health and Environmental Risks reviewed the evidence linking fluoride to bone cancer and concluded that it was equivocal, stating, quote, fluoride cannot be classified as to its carcinogenicity. Okay? There is just, the evidence is too low quality and too inconsistent. Often, not always, but often when we see evidence that looks like this, there is a large amount of bias in the research itself, where people are trying to prove a specific point, and then other people are trying to replicate their research and failing to do so. So, the following year, 2011, California's Carcinogen Identification Committee, or CIC, which is well known for slapping cancer warning labels on everything under the sun, and presumably the sun itself, if they could reach that high, also issued a report concluding, quote, fluoride and its salts have not been clearly shown to cause cancer. Okay? So, not impossible, but I would say there is no convincing evidence that it is true.
Of all the things that you could be worried about causing cancer, this should be at the bottom of the list.
Yeah. Other things that we know for absolute certain do cause cancer: campfires, heating with natural gas or cooking with gas, sausages, like consumption of that kind of preserved meat. My understanding is that there is currently some debate going on as to whether red meat in and of itself is still classifiable as carcinogenic, but last I checked it was still listed. That may change.
Remember, also, caveat, there are categories of carcinogens too, as we talk about this. So if you talk about...
to be clear, I'm talking about category 1.
Okay.
So there are categories of carcinogens, and we are absolutely certain that these things do cause cancer.
And it's a super high bar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're not all equally carcinogenic. So the categories of cancer, category 1, category 2A, category 2B.
I always forget that part.
Those ones are how sure we are that they do contribute to cancer risk. But that is different than how great their contribution is, like how much they bump up that likelihood. which might be what you're trying to get to.
No, I wasn't clear that you were talking about only category 1.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so these are the things that we are positive cause cancer, okay? Or contribute to the risk of cancer.
On the cancer vibe check scale.
Yeah, cancer. Being a carpenter is another one. It's one of my favorite ones.
I remember that one.
Alcohol consumption, cigarettes, obviously, but lots of things that we all do all the time.
In many cases, very, very much daily or weekly activities.
So, certainly possible, but at this point, fluoride would fall under category 3, which is the category 3 or 4, actually. It's been a while since I reviewed these. So not even category 2, which is where Wi-Fi landed. Category 2B was Wi-Fi last time they updated, which annoys me because it is implausible and the evidence is garbage. I don't think Wi-Fi causes cancer, but we've gone over this. Anyway, exhaustingly.
Guess what else RFK believes?
Oh, God damn it. Okay, here's one that is worth talking about. Does fluoride cause IQ loss or neurodevelopmental disorders? This one I have to give a maybe, but probably not. And certainly not at the concentrations that we are using it. This is actually a new line of evidence with emerging research, generally fairly low quality population level evidence. I'm not casting shade, but this kind of research is really hard to do and it's hard to get good data. We're not going to do a randomized controlled trial where we fluoridate the water for one child and don't fluoridate for the other, and etc. But there is some population evidence that there may be some neurocognitive effects of fluoride, specifically that when pregnant people are exposed to high levels of fluoride in their drinking water, their offspring may have slightly lower IQ scores, for what that's worth, and slightly higher incidences of neurocognitive and developmental challenges, suggesting that there may be some risk here. This evidence was actually just reviewed by Health Canada, I believe, end of last year, and they published sort of a summary of their discussions and findings that they had with the expert panel on the Government of Canada website. So I'll link that in the show notes. And there may be changes to the guidelines that are forthcoming soon. However, even if this preliminary data is borne out in more rigorous studies, it only appears to demonstrate cognitive effects at concentrations above 1.5 parts per million. So that's the WHO cutoff, which is more than double the level used by Health Canada and the National Institutes of Health as the target for water fluoridation. So again, there's no evidence that there is any developmental or neurocognitive effects of fluoride for children that are born in areas where water fluoridation is at the appropriate target levels. Okay? And there is no effect, and there is no evidence that it affects cognition in adults at any concentration. Okay?
So it's the developing brain.
Yes, it is. It is just the in utero developing brain. Okay? And similarly, we know that fluoride treatment is actually most effective for children like ages like 0 to 4.
I am hoping this is well controlled for other factors like socioeconomic status and marginalized group status and things like that, which alarm bells are going off like, who tends to live in places where either the water isn't controlled well or maybe resources are not as healthy for humans?
And what other factors are at play that might result in them testing more poorly on IQ measures, which are...
Like, there's so many possible red flags
which are
there.
fraught at the very least.
We have talked about the IQ test.
Yeah.
So I actually have a question in that vein. We know that IQ has a lot of issues as a statistic. Do we have any reason to not have confidence when you say things like Health Canada says the safe target is blah, blah, blah? Do we have a lot of confidence in that number? Or is it, I guess...
confidence, they're right about that being the safe number? Or
that they have reached that number in a way that wasn't influenced by politics or things like that, that it is like a science-based number?
That is a good and fair question. And the fact that they go through periodically this kind of public consultation process, and they are in the process of doing updates, they may not change. I suspect that they will not change the fluoridation target, but we'll see. But the fact that they have this public consultation process, they summarize their findings and their discussion points even before they come out with, this is what we're going to do about those. These are all good signs and signs of a process working appropriately. They talk about who the experts on the review panel are, what their credentials are, where they're from, etc. So all of that, I think, is good. I would say that my confidence is about as high as it ever will be for any political process. And this is still fundamentally a political process. And I tend to be skeptical, cynical when it comes to politics. But I think that it's probably pretty good.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, that was a bit of an extra tangent.
No, and that's a great
nearly hour-long segment now.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Jim.
Okay, we're getting to the end here. So, RFK's next claim: does fluoride cause thyroid disease? No. But this is at least plausible. We talked about iodine before, which is very important and is added to salt to prevent iodine deficiency. Excessive fluoride intake can actually displace and interfere with iodine uptake, reducing the efficacy of the iodine supplementation that we're doing, and again, putting people technically at risk of goiter and hypothyroidism. I was unable to find evidence that the levels of supplementation that we use for water fluoridation lead to problems with iodine uptake. And I would say they don't. But we do know that it is plausible that if you're, again, getting too much fluoride, which again is something that is more likely if you don't have a water fluoridation system that is working properly, then it is plausible that too much fluoride would interfere with iodine uptake and result, again, in iodine deficiency and goiter and thyroid disease.
We are a scary, delicate balance.
We are a scary, delicate balance. Again, this is why we study the safe levels, and there's no evidence that fluoride at the target levels cause thyroid disease. As always, the dose makes the poison. Every apple contains arsenic, but I'm not foregoing my apple pie. This guy, RFK, is a credulous chain letter grandpa who just believes anything he reads provided it is contrarian. Okay?
And that it uses big enough words. He seems like a really big fan of big words.
He doesn't understand them, but he uses them.
Yes.
So, what are the actual risks associated with fluoride? So we've talked about some theoretical risks that can happen. So we talked about bones. We talked about the hypothetical neurocognitive effects that I'm not particularly worried about. The effect size, extremely small, and the quality of the data, also pretty small. The confounding factors, pretty concerning. We'll see how that evidence shakes out. It's still very preliminary. In terms of actual risks, we know about the skeletal fluorosis. Ironically, there is another real concern with fluoride that is not actually addressed by RFK at all, and it's like the one that everybody knows about, or everybody who knows anything about fluoride knows about, and that is dental hyperfluorosis. This is the most common complication of excessive fluoride exposure. It occurs if children between age 0 and 4, while their teeth are developing, so both the milk teeth and then the permanent teeth, if they're exposed to much higher levels of fluoride than the sort of known recommended safe levels, so the 1.5 per the WHO, Dental hyperfluorosis comes in sort of 3 categories. There's mild, where there's no visible hyperfluorosis. You can, if you're a dentist and you're using a loop to examine teeth, you can technically see mild hyperfluorosis, but the only effect is your teeth are actually slightly stronger. If there's moderate fluorosis, and with mild, you also do get, in addition to slightly stronger teeth, you also get a reduction in cavities. With moderate hyperfluorosis, you will get some bright white or light brown staining on your teeth. And your teeth are generally normal in strength. They're a little bit less supple, we might say, but they're not really more prone to chipping, and they are still more resistant to tooth decay. Okay, but they have these like stains on them, like white streaks, some brown streaks sometimes, and that's what they found in those Colorado populations, right? And then finally, you have severe hyperfluorosis, where the teeth have significant brown staining, and they are still a little bit more resistant to cavities, they are more prone to chips and tooth breakage because they're too hard because of the hyperfluorosis. And again, this is only an issue if kids between the ages of 0 and 4 are exposed to levels of fluoride regularly that are way higher than our targets set by Health Canada. Remember, most toothpastes contain about 2,000 times the amount of fluoride found in drinking water, which is, I guess, the reason we don't recommend drinking toothpaste. This is why we recommend, when we're talking to new parents, we recommend limiting or avoiding fluoridated toothpaste in children who are too young to understand that they need to spit their toothpaste out. As Ashlyn has discussed previously and on this show, just cleaning off the teeth physically, like wiping them with a damp cloth, is sufficient for young kids in most cases, or applying an amount of toothpaste the size of a grain of rice.
Wow.
Is what is recommended for these young kids. Once they can understand that they're not supposed to eat the toothpaste, they're supposed to spit it out, then you can start using a pea-sized bit of toothpaste.
Is the grain of rice thing an effective amount, or is it a training amount?
It's both. There is a dose-response relationship. But it is both. It will have some efficacy, not as much. The most effective thing that you can do to prevent tooth decay in your kids is to not feed them juice and not give them anything other than water in a bottle at bedtime. Those are the big things that we always recommend. Yeah, so to sum up, at high concentrations, there are some risks associated with fluoride consumption. One of the goals of water fluoridation is not just to add fluoride, but it's also to reduce those concentrations that are too high. At the recommended concentrations used for water fluoridation in North America, there is currently no evidence of any health risks, and there is significant evidence of health benefit. We're talking dental health, but we know that dental health correlates and is causally related to many disease processes. Okay? Again, water fluoridation is not about adding a dangerous chemical to your drinking water. It is about looking at the level of a naturally occurring mineral in drinking water and adjusting it to be optimal for your health. All right, Laura, why don't you tell us about antidepressants?
Anybody need some now? So RFK thinks that antidepressants cause mass murders? I didn't know this was a thing that people believed. Because it sounded so far-fetched. I'm like, what? No, people said that. And of course people said that. And of course they were Fox News people too. Like, this is, it all lines up, right? But I was, honestly, when that was in the topic list, I'm like, what? No, no one says that.
It's the gay frog thing, right?
Oh, God. I'm going to keep this short and sweet because this is annoying to have to talk about.
Thank God. And by God, I mean Jesus Christ.
Oh my God, shut up. God. All right. So,
Timothy. We've all been up too long.
The short answer to this question is obviously no. The slightly longer answer is correlation does not equal causation. And the only slightly longer answer is, well, there is a tiny chance that maybe, but really probably not. So there have actually been some studies that have looked into this. And what I think sparked a lot of this is there was is this a systematic review or a meta-analysis? I don't know. No, it's a really large study. I'm sorry, I'm failing to see what type of study it was, but it was a very large study done in or published in 2020 that came out of Sweden that looked at the connection between SSRIs, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which is a very common type of medication, one of the most common types of medication, and quite a large class of medications as well.
It's the most common type of antidepressant, of which there are several.
Yeah. Absolutely. So thank you. It's antidepressant used for other mental health conditions as well. Yeah. So it was looking at the connection for this class of medication and violent crime in adolescents, young and older adults. So this very large study, again, they looked at, so what they did, and I think this is really important, is they in Sweden, they looked at both the drug dispensing records for SSRIs for a huge group of people in one area. I believe it was a total of almost 800,000 people. So, and it was anybody between 15 and 60, so quite a large age range there. So they looked at the drug dispensing records, and then they looked at the violent crime records over the same period of time. And so then they would pair up any names or modifiers that would match with that.
That is...
They would pair up the names? It wasn't just correlating the rates of
I don't know. You can read the study, people. It is really late when we're doing this. What you need to know is that they were able to match up. They took these two lists and they were able to figure out what kind of went together with these things here.
Oh, I would have expected that it would just be like for each year, total number of prescriptions filled versus total number of violent incidences. It's interesting. Anyway,
okay.
Sorry.
I don't want to get into this too much. I have to take a research class that I hate, and I don't want to do any more research right now. Go read the study. A lot of it is out there. Okay. But ultimately, they looked at huge groups of people and they looked at the coincidence of these two things there. And they did find that for people who had an SSRI prescription, there was a smaller increased hazard ratio for violent crime during the time that prescription was valid, or what they considered. They gave a bit of a buffer on either side based on actual usage and things like that.
I have so many questions.
Interesting.
Does violent crime include suicide?
So I don't,
because I know that there are some cases where starting a medication like that can increase suicidality for a bit, and if that's included in violent crime, then there's your uptick right there.
Yeah, and that evidence is currently being reviewed and debated. There's one of the plausible reasons that I have heard for that is the actual depression. The mood changes tend to lift a little bit more slowly than the amotivation.
I've heard the same, yeah.
But that also disputed, and it's kind of one of those just so stories that isn't it's like a theoretical explanation that is... Anyway, whether there is that increased risk, currently I would say unclear, but it is a black box warning on all these medications.
And it's more so for very young people.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Much less so for adults.
Yeah. And it's also in the first, I believe, 6 weeks, 6 months. It's it started the
beginning.
Yeah.
So no, this doesn't really capture that part of it. This is looking at violent crimes towards others. Okay. I'm wondering it could perhaps include violent crimes towards oneself as part of that, which is something that we see sometimes. But no, this was looking at violent crimes directed towards others. So They did find that during that period that people were prescribed these SSRIs, they did have a slightly higher hazard ratio or risk of committing the violent crimes. And that extended for about 12 weeks afterwards, which is kind of what, like, that relates to that long-term effect of a lot of these medications, right? They're not, they take a while to come out of the system, even once you've stopped taking them.
Your brain is changing its pathways. Things might get a little crosswired.
Right. So if you take just the results of that, it sounds like, oh man, these meds are causing problems, but they're supposed to be solving the problems. They're making it worse. Don't you worry. The study authors have lots of important information for you, so please keep reading. So one of the biggest things is that overall, it was a very small percentage of the population that committed violent crimes. It was like 2.73% over the multi-year study period of 800,000 people. That's not a lot of people. So the risk is still small. Okay, so please keep that in mind, because sometimes we forget about what the actual risk, not relative or whatnot, is. They also point out that violence, aggression, things like that, which are often like precursors to the crime, are also key factors in the underlying illnesses for which these meds are often prescribed. So this study can't tell us what the violent thoughts, feelings, whatever was, or the tendencies toward it were before the medication happened, right? We also, very importantly, don't actually know that the people were taking these medications. As we all know, who here in this room has gotten a prescription and never filled it, or filled it and never took it? Like, most of us have done at least, thank you. But like, the fact that someone has a prescription or even got the pills or the injection, whatever it is, doesn't mean that they're actually taking it regularly, taking it at all. We don't know. All we know is that at some point, somebody got that bottle of pills. What happened to it after that? We have no idea.
So to tease this out a little bit more, the study population, was it looking at people with a diagnosis of major depressive disorder that got an SSRI versus didn't? No. Right. So we know, I think this is what you're getting at. We know that people who have a mood disorder will have greater predisposition toward these kinds of outbursts that may result in violence. Okay. And it is impossible to determine from this data, may have a greater predisposition. And it is impossible to determine through this data whether it is the case that the SSRIs would cause like an increase in violent crime, or the underlying condition causes both an SSRI prescription and also an increase in violent crime. Right? Yeah, I think so. We cannot draw hard conclusions from a lot of this. Like, the authors will say that in the end, they feel that there may be a slightly elevated risk. Like, with all of this, that is their conclusion, and that's part of the subjective part of studies. But they then say this should not be used as a reason to stop prescriptions or to not prescribe if you think it is a warranted thing. What you should do is, just like we were talking about earlier with the risk of suicide, is assess the patient really well about checking in with them, informing them so they know what to look for. So maybe their family or friends know what to look for, and encourage them to, and then check in with them early and regularly when you start that medication. So then you can prevent some of these things there. And then we also know that there are some things that some meds, even if you, like, if you have a diagnosed condition, you need the medication, some people just don't, some meds just don't fit for some people. They just don't. We don't have, it's just because of biology and whatnot.
We call it medication bingo.
Yeah. So you sometimes have to try this. And so then sometimes maybe that person was in the process of trying to get the right med and they just hadn't found it yet, and these are long acting kinds of meds. So that's pretty much the gist of it here. This whole thing boils down to, we see two things happen at once and we like to say that they happen because of each other, but that's That's not how it works necessarily.
It's not science.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot of things there that can go into it. So you can read more into it, but honestly, that's as far as you need to go. That's anybody who's going any further than that is just being disingenuous.
Cool.
Thank you, Laura. It explains some things.
All right, Lauren, take us home.
I am going last, so you're going to humor me just a little bit as I dedicate the first couple of seconds to a slightly unhinged rant that has been building as we talk.
Oh, boy.
Because we've been talking very nicely about Robert Kennedy Jr. I'm not nice.
Oh, be nice to little Bobby.
No. Futurama led me to believe that space truck stop parasites would be good for me. Futurama lied to me. Brainworms did absolutely nothing useful for RFK Jr. This man is a wrong opinions machine. Like, I would not be surprised if he was manufactured in a lab for the express purpose of having the worst takes possible on scientific and medical tropes. If you flipped a coin and followed the known science for every time you got ahead, and you followed a Mad Lib written by a 4-year-old, every time you flipped the tails, you would still have a better track record than Bobby Kennedy. During the last reign of Narthalotep, some QAnon people believed that JFK Jr. was alive and would come back at any moment to save them. You remember this? Mm-hmm. QAnon?
Oh, dear Lord.
This time, however, they ordered their JFK Jr. from Wish. I'm not going to get started on the rest of the cabinet picks coming out of the States, the news that we're getting as we're recording this in the last week of November. But it's like he went to Arkham Asylum and walked down the corridor naming Batman villains to ironic positions of power.
Penguin, Crazy Quilt, Eraser, Polka Dot Man, Mime, Tarantula, King Tut, Orca, Killer Moth, Orange Harriet, Zodiac Master, Gentleman Ghost, Clock King, Calendar Man, Kite Man, Cat Man, Zebra Man, and the Condiment King.
Okay, are you making some of those up?
Nope, they're all real.
That said, I'm trying to rein myself in to talk specifically about Robert Kennedy Jr. and his abhorrent ideas about HIV, AIDS, Anthony Fauci, and gay people in general. With so many hot takes bubbling up in the bad ideas stew that is the RFK brain, why did I pick this particular topic? A couple of reasons. Firstly, whether we like it or not, AIDS will always be seen as a queer virus, despite worldwide shifts in the demographic of those living with HIV and AIDS over the past 30 years. And I'm always going to jump on reporting on the queer issues. It's just who I am. Secondly, though this pales in scope to his bad takes on vaccines, as Ashlyn was talking about, or the uncontrolled fucking raw milk that is giving people avian flu this week, it's bringing up bad science that will get people killed, and it centers bigots and their ideas yet again. Lastly, it just makes my blood boil, as you may have been able to tell. So the short of it is, RFK is on the record for A, denying that HIV causes AIDS, and B, that AZT killed more people than it helped, and that, consequently, Anthony Fauci used it to get rich and murder 80 children, there's that 80, and dump them in an unmarked grave in the 80s and 90s.
Whoa, that's wildly specific conspiracy theory stuff. Wow, is that recent? That he said that stuff? Like how? Oh, good Lord. Mm-hmm. Oh, go on.
We'll get into the recency of it from what I could find.
It is funny, like, how much he just fucking hates Anthony Fauci.
Okay, but first, we'll just lay it right out there. HIV causes AIDS. Boom. That is known science. The malicious untruth The malicious lie that it doesn't is from the bullcrap pile that is the work of Berkeley professor Peter Duesberg, an infamous first-wave AIDS denialist.
Mm-hmm.
He is the Andrew Wakefield of AIDS.
Mm-hmm.
Duesberg, who was a biologist but not an AIDS researcher, nothing to do with AIDS, claimed that HIV was a harmless, quote, passenger virus, and that the true cause of HIV/AIDS was...
I forget.
Drug use.
Oh.
Yeah. I just want to congratulate you, Lauren, on how carefully you are pronouncing his last name.
Yep. Mm-hmm. I worked on that. So if HIV doesn't cause AIDS, what, according to Duesberg, does? Well, according to RFK as well, it's poppers.
Oh, geez.
I did hear this.
What? Oh my god!
Unhinged.
This guy is such a like a grandpa.
I was just reading about poppers today because there's this viral post on Reddit about somebody noticing that a fellow person in the Wicked musical watching it was bopping along and was doing poppers in the theater.
Yep. And I do want to clarify, we're getting back to reality. Neither amyl nitrate, which is the name of what poppers actually are, or any other drug, party prevalent or not, causes AIDS. AIDS is a bloodborne virus that develops from unmanaged HIV. And how do we manage HIV and AIDS? Well, with a drug regimen, some antiretrovirals. And in the 1990s, that drug regimen began, and for some people, it was the be-all and the end-all, with AZT. Why the hell does Robert Kennedy Jr. have any sort of opinion on HIV, AIDS, or anything? Well, why did he have any opinion on anything we've talked about tonight? Christ!
But this is really like an opinion that's like, what?
Yeah, it's because of his hatred for Anthony Fauci.
Oh, jeez.
As Ashlyn had alluded to earlier, Kennedy wrote a book called, okay, you're going to love this title, The Real Anthony Fauci, Bill Gates, Big Pharma, and the Global War on Democracy and Public Health. And he published that in 2021.
Oh, God.
And that's as far back as I can see this stuff. Like, he was, as far as I could find, and who knows what he was doing whenever. This is a very recent thing that he's brought back out. This book of his is a big seller on Amazon. And it's got a 4.8 on Goodreads.
I bet.
Incidentally, the title format, the real insert name here, it's the same format that Scientology uses for smear websites. So I'm not conflating RFK with Scientology. He's just an unoriginal hack, even in this. Let's go back to, why does RFK Jr. hate Fauci? Short of giving myself a brainworm by reading his book, it's mostly because Fauci is the current literal personification of science and vaccines and actual medical health knowledge in the United States, which is anathema to everything that RFK stand for. That's really what it is. He's just a jealous little bitch. Also because grifters assume everyone is a grifter.
Yeah.
RFK knows that if he were the director at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, he'd make as much bank as he possibly fucking could from studies and treatments and whatever. So he assumes that Fauci has done the same as well.
Love it.
When testifying before, I think, Congress, Fauci said that he received a small stipend from a treatment that he developed in the 70s, but it came out to like less than $1,000 or something. Yeah, so he's not doing it to make money in this position in that way.
It's almost like some people, or maybe even lots of people, do things just because they're important or good things to do for the species.
Yeah. You are not the director of a public health initiative for 40 freaking years because you're making bank at it.
Yeah, because everybody's always said, you know what a good way to get rich is?
Public service.
Public service.
Aye. All right, so his complaints about Fauci are what brings us to AZT. In 1987, during the height of the AIDS crisis in the gay community, AIDS activists like Larry Kramer founded the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. ACT UP, We've talked about ACT UP a little bit before on the show. The group was, quote, made up of people who had no rights, facing a disease with no cure, who had been abandoned by their families, their government, and their society. And that's from Let the Record Show, A Political History of ACT UP, New York. So ACT UP was loosely organized as a bunch of groups, each with their own special set of talents. And they were each working on different parts of the American government and the American people at the time to acknowledge and work towards treatment for AIDS. Famously, Reagan didn't say shit about it until it was way too late. And same with Mulrooney.
Yep.
That guy was a scuzzbag.
I had a punching bag of him.
Amazing.
A blow-up punching bag.
Ben Mulrooney is getting just as bad as his dad, eh? Yeah. Whatever, that's...
We could just rag on Canadian pseudo-celebrities all night here.
Yeah. Let's get back to ACT UP. They were responsible for a push toward real patient-centered healthcare in the United States. It sounds like hyperbole, but even Fauci agrees with this, as the person who was in charge of these kind of medical directives. Quote from The New Yorker in 2002, in a piece that he was working, but that was on him. He said, before AIDS and before ACT UP, all experimental medical decisions were made by physicians. Larry Kramer, by assuring consumer input to the FDA, puts us on the defensive over our approbations. ACT UP put medical treatment in the hands of patients, and that's the way it ought to be. I know I do a lot of quotes in my articles, but I wanted that whole one in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
ACT UP also played a lead role in pushing government agencies and drug companies to accelerate testing, lower costs of drugs, and bring people with HIV and AIDS into the care design process, including with AZT. And when AZT first came onto the market in the early 1990s, it cost about $10,000 per year for treatment. Yeah. And that's at that money. So that works out to about $57 in 2024 American dollars.
This is how I was always sitting in there watching Rent going, how do they afford these meds?
They didn't pay rent.
That's right. They weren't going to pay.
Yeah, that's how much rent was in New York.
Sorry to digress.
It's all good. Kennedy twists the idea of patient-centered care. He twists it right on his head, the little weasel. And he claims that Fauci conspired with Burroughs Wellcome, which later became GlaxoSmithKline, to use fraudulent tricks to get AZT approved too quickly. While Burroughs Wellcome did grossly profit off AZT, Kennedy claims that Fauci's promotion of it during the AIDS epidemic led to countless deaths because it, quote, killed faster than the natural progression of AIDS left untreated.
I saw you! Man, everybody got AIDS and shit.
Oh, yes, because he's an expert.
And Fauci, in Kennedy's telling, instead sabotaged effective and safer treatments that were not as financially valuable. None of this is true.
This is, it's so infuriating because although, yeah, it's frustrating and sad that we still don't have, a reliable cure for AIDS. It has, for HIV AIDS, it has been cured in a few people, which is really cool, but we're working on it. But it is incredible the progress that has been made in HIV treatment, and the fact that now somebody with a new diagnosis of HIV, if
you're stepping on the end of my segment, no man.
I'm so sorry.
You had your time, honey.
Yeah. No, I understand your excitement as well. Yeah. So, RFK Jr. also asserts that Fauci allowed pharmaceutical companies to experiment forcefully on Black and Hispanic foster children with dangerous AIDS and cancer therapies, leading to the death of those 80 children, some of whom were buried in the mass grave.
I mean, that sounds bad.
Yeah.
If it's true.
The actual report...
Big if true.
Yeah. The actual report that this conspiracy theory is based on, as in Laura's segment, there might be a grain of truth. But let's look at the segment. Yeah, well, let's look at it. So the report deals with clinical trials for extremely ill HIV-positive children. So they were either born with or infected very young with HIV. According to this report, 80 out of the 532 children who participated in clinical trials or studies between 1985 and 2005, so we've got a 20-year, they died while in foster care, and which is tragic. But none were because of these clinical trials. 25 of those children died when enrolled in a medication trial, and those children did not die of the medication, but they died of complication due to AIDS. I have a huge problem, as I mentioned a little bit earlier in my segment, with the American and Canadian governmental response to the AIDS crisis. So many people died needlessly and cruelly before we could get any sort of treatment or acknowledgement. And we are the generations of queers who are coming after, and that's for another podcast. Yeah, Fauci holds some blame. He holds his portion of the blame for the fact that it wasn't higher up in the government. Like, it wasn't... Can't blame him for Reagan, but...
Yeah, we're not engaging in hero worship here.
He didn't withhold any treatments, and he didn't insist for personal profit that HIV and AIDS were viruses and not drug-related. He was the first one who came out and said, hey, these are viruses. And RFK Jr. is saying, well, they're not viruses, but he's saying that for his own gain.
Right.
HIV and AIDS are real. In citing Duisberg, with his now international platform, Kennedy leads the charge in a noticeable resurgence of AIDS denialism, with people like Joe Rogan.
I hate that guy.
I can't even watch news radio anymore. I just want to punch him.
I had never watched news radio until we watched it recently. I'm just like, why is this guy popular at all? Ever? Anyway, go on. So
we got Joe Rogan, and we have noted football scholar Aaron Rodgers. They are both parroting Duisberg's ideas.
Aaron Rodgers now, hey?
Oh,
I know
yeah.
he was on a lot of those trains, but I didn't realize this was one of them. Okay.
You got to get on all the trains, Jem. Otherwise, he can't be friends with his buddies anymore.
Seth Kickelman, who is the author of Denying AIDS, Conspiracy Theories, Pseudoscience, and Human Tragedy, which is a book I want to read but didn't have time this week, he says, quote, "It's hard to believe we're having this conversation." He's worried that the danger of a Kennedy-controlled Department of Health and Human Services is not that Kennedy will directly target AIDS studies per se, but that he'll preside over a general reduction in science funding which will impact HIV research. Kennedy has already laid out a plan to radically reshape the National Institutes of Health, which is the division of HHS, and cuts to the NIH could mean that the Office of AIDS Research, which is at the forefront of global research, could easily go away. So AIDS denialism is a bellwether for the harm that Kennedy will absolutely do.
Yeah.
And I'm so fucking angry, and I'm scared, because it all comes north too.
Ugh.
And I have a lot of other emotions that want to come out in words that my co-host correctly vetoed me saying when I floated them by this morning. HIV causes AIDS. AIDS is real. AZT was the first. It was in the first wave of antiretrovirals that has led to today's treatment plans that allow people living with HIV to lead full and long lives, usually with undetectable levels of the virus. And undetectable means untransmittable.
That's right.
Brainworms. Ugh.
Yeah, do we know the same thing about brainworms?
Or eating a bear?
Not the whole bear. There's a few nibbles here and there.
Christ. Okay, that's my segment.
Okay, in the interest of time, who has a something nice?
I'm pretty sure it's essentially been my same something nice for the last couple of months, but I am still a little bit in awe of how much I love my job.
Awesome.
Today was the second day in a row that the sewer backed up into my kitchen at work. Yesterday we had to cancel dinner because we couldn't finish anything and we couldn't wash our hands because we couldn't use any water. Today we thought we were in the clear, and then it happened again 30 minutes before service.
Oh no!
And we were able to pivot to a takeout meal and still get people fed who showed up.
Yay!
And like everybody just had the most amazing attitude of like, this crisis will bond us. Like that was everybody's immediate feeling was like, we're going to get through this and we're going to be better because of it. it just like I left in a great mood after dealing with the second sewer backup in a row. Like that's ridiculous.
You're like, this is not great mood material, yet here we are.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's amazing, actually.
Yeah.
That's so wonderful.
You come floating home from work every night. It's so good to see.
Yeah, that is really, it is really powerful to have that sense that you're doing good.
Yeah. I'm really taking a lot of inspiration from Margaret Killjoy and the other folks at Cool Zone Media who are talking a lot lately about how like it's really hard to screw up feeding people. Yeah. And like I am feeding a lot of people every day, and I appear to be able to like continue doing that for the foreseeable future and
still doing what's for dinner.
Yeah, I'm still pulling off what's for dinner. This week I didn't even have to do anything for my weekly food delivery project because I had enough help with people who volunteered and of course Lauren, that like it was just done by the time I got home. All I had to do was direct it. It was awesome.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I'm going to keep feeding people until everything collapses. And it feels, I'm like so content with that. I'm just like fine that everything is going to be a disaster because I know what I'm going to do to improve my little corner of the world for as long as I can.
Yep. Yeah.
Did you also want to do your listener feedback right now? Or save that for...
Oh, sure. It is something nice, too. Recently, actually helping out with What's for Dinner has been one of our neighbors. And when she was over the first time helping out, we actually got to talking about Palestine and whatnot. And she was like, did you hear about that guy at the U of M? We directed her to the podcast. Lauren did. And yesterday, as we were driving around, I took her to work with me. Because it was, again, it's been a disaster. But I did take your friend to work day because we've been out of volunteers. And she had a great time. And we were talking about how she had recently listened to the latest episode of the podcast about my adventures in Romania.
The medical rage.
Yes. And she talked about how she was really glad that we looked at the studies for the medications that I was prescribed instead of just reading a few Facebook posts and believing whatever we saw. And Lauren had the best line. Lauren said, well, we're 3 trained scientists and a technical writer. Studies are what we do. So it was cute to have somebody who I guess is a lot less familiar with our family and like our history as people, who went into our podcast and was surprised to find out that it was science-based.
I remember even Brendan would say sometimes when they were reminded about this podcast, this is an old friend of mine.
Former podcast guest.
They were on the show about Trump, actually.
Oh,
just
damn.
Prior to the first inauguration, I remember.
Yes, I remember that episode well.
Anyway, they would say to me sometimes, oh yeah, I forget that your podcast is about science because you're always talking about politics. And I'm like, well, as you know.
Guess what's political, baby?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So thank you, Athena.
That's very cool.
Mm-hmm. My something nice is very short. Blue sky.
Yeah.
You like it over there?
I left Twitter the day Musk took over.
Mm-hmm.
I've been looking for something. I'm cautiously optimistic because there's still blocking not as much as I was on Twitter, but there's still some. But I have hopes, and seeing the correlation numbers of up and down in between Blue Sky and Twitter users, like new accounts versus deactivating, it just does my cynical little heart happy.
Yeah, I finally bit the bullet and opened up a Blue Sky account. I wish that Mastodon had taken off more than it did. I
know why it didn't.
I exactly. As much as I enjoy Mastodon is very much the Linux of social media and will remain so.
Wait, are you trying to say that one of the things that people like most about social media is stuff you have to figure out for yourself and is not just easy?
Yeah. Like Linux. It could be harder, and it is getting easier, but it's still fucking Linux.
Why does Linux have the best army?
Why?
Because it can customize its kernels.
Oh my god.
Anyway, I don't know if I follow you, but I'll have to find your account.
I'm at Rainbow Ashlyn. There'll be pictures of cats and food.
At L.E. Bailey.
At
Also cats and food.
At spurl.com, because that's how you do your validation.
I'm not on Blue Sky.
Yet.
I was on Twitter. I just deactivated it a couple days ago, but I had effectively not used it for years. And I had stopped using it because I've never liked Twitter. And so I don't know that I want to go on a Twitter analog.
Yeah, that's fine. I just despise the experience of all of the meta and meta alikes.
Yeah, I despise them too. But
I deactivated my Facebook earlier this week. Sorry, Mom.
Yeah, that's coming too. I haven't used mine really for a long time. I'll occasionally post some pictures there, but something nice, Laura?
No.
The fact that your segment is done.
I don't know. It will soon be term break, which will be nice. That will be good.
That's why I've lost all my students at work.
Because they're in exams.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if I can make it, I'll see if I can come over there, because I don't have exams. All my stuff is due before exam period.
Would you like a bottle of homemade mead to celebrate the end of your term?
I mean, I would not say no to alcohol, but don't shorten your stash for it. I have purchased alcohol as well. That's all. We're going to bed. Sorry, I thought you did your something nice already. You had talked a lot.
No, that was just in
Oh my god. Go ahead, Jem.
My something nice is it is winter bike season. I switched over from my summer bike to my winter bike because we have had our first few real snowfalls here, which is quite late in the season for Winnipeg. And I discovered when I busted out my winter bike that I had failed to appropriately clean it the previous season, and so it was completely rusted shut.
No.
We put more grit than salt on the roads. We're not Ontario or Quebec, but there is still salt in there, and so it was not in a usable state. However, a few parts were salvageable, so instead of spending a few $100 at Canadian Tire and then putting my studded tires on that, I spent $50 on Kijiji and got a nice-ish used bike with the appropriate diameter rims, missing a seat, not usable handlebars, a bunch of stuff that needed fixing, and then I spent a couple days tinkering and customizing and swapping things over, and I'm back to riding with my studded tires, and I haven't been hit yet.
It's been 3 days.
Oh, I thought you were going to say that you 3D printed yourself a new bike.
My 3D printer is not my something nice. I managed to turn every hobby into work.
Ditto.
Well.
Ask Noble and Whimsical about that.
Yeah, it's all right, though.
But I like being able to, as I'm on my way to a shift at St. B, I like being able to get some exercise in.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Thanks for joining me tonight, everybody.
This was our December episode. I was going to say this is our Christmas.
I know. We're just going to ignore the fact that major holiday season is coming up and that tomorrow is American Thanksgiving and all of that.
Yeah.
So enjoy being festive for the next month.
Tomorrow as we're recording this.
Yes.
So last week or whatever as this comes out. But
yeah, I forgot about that. You know what I mean.
Regardless, we don't need to do a holiday episode. And our next episode, I have certainly talked a lot. More than usual these last few episodes. I am also going to be transitioning in January onto internal medicine CTU for a couple months, so I'm probably not going to be talking as much, and I may if I'm present, I may not have a segment. Fingers crossed. But I won't be gone forever, probably not for long, and I'll try to at least make an appearance on the show.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Well, we'll see you all in January.
Bye, folks.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Show notes and references for all of our episodes are available at lueepodcast.com, where you can also find links to donate or get in touch. If you'd like to support the show, the best way to do that is with a review on Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you found us, or by sharing this episode with a friend.
Life. Don't talk to me about life.
He was hugely responsible for a vaccine outbreak in Samoa. He visited...
A vaccine outbreak?
Oh, goodness.
Thank you for catching that.
Thank you.
I mean, like, if it would be good if he was responsible for a vaccine outbreak. This is kind of what we want.
Okay, that's a good outtake. So this was one... Got another dishwasher. Hold on. I'm gonna take a sip of my coffee here.
We only have one dishwasher. It just drains a few times. That's all.
That'd be very special if you had multiple ones.
Yeah.
Anybody else hear the room tone?
Yes, the refrigerator.
Okay.
No.
There's
It's
something...
the PS5. It's something over there. I think it's the PS5. That doesn't sound like a refrigerator to me.
It sounds like things that we can't get rid of on the back.
It's not the PS5, it's in the hole.
The hell?
This room tone has shown up on recordings that we have, and this is the noise that we can't get rid of in the background sometimes.
Is it the switch or something? Like, I feel like there's lots of electronics there.
You have to be quiet because I'm listening. Sorry.
Sorry, I mentioned it.
It's gone now.
Yeah. It is actually this
The Raspberry Pi. The tiniest computer over there is making the biggest whir. That's what runs the server, right?
Yeah.
Or the TV.
No, this is something that we don't use very often.
Oh, what do we even use it for these days?
We don't. It is a video game system for the kids.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, that's fine. Huxley will be sad, but whatever. There
That's
we
fine.
go.
We can
Mystery
plug it back in.
solved.
That's fine.
I think it's been one of those things that's been getting louder over time. That Raspberry Pi is pretty old by this point, hey?
Ish. It also does not go into a sleep mode appropriately because I have not spent a lot of time fiddling with it. Much better.
Cancer.
Right. Okay. So, I'm sure Marissa would be very appreciative, Lauren, if you ended up editing this one.
Yeah.
But we'll give her the option. I'm happy to. I'm happy to have her edit too. Now, something unrelated to fluoride, technically, water fluoridation anyway, but something that I need to ask you all. Something that I need to ask you all that I was reminded of. I want everyone to picture in your head toothpaste on a toothbrush as depicted in an advertisement.
Oh, God,
you know that beautiful wave shape? Mm-hmm. Can anyone tell me what the technical term for a wave-shaped blob of toothpaste sitting on a toothbrush is?
Oh my God.
It was the subject of litigation about 15 years ago.
I feel like somebody wanted to claim that it was called a crest or something.
That would be a good one. That would be good. Oh.
Any other guesses?
There was an Aquafresh stripe thingy. I think I kind of, I remember this, but I do not remember.
Yeah, Aquafresh was one of the litigants.
Yeah.
It is called a nurdle.
No.
What? Can you be done now, please?
Oh, that's going to be the last outtake on the show.